Well, good afternoon. I'm Walt. I live near Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I first started working in healthcare for about 20 years. And in that 20-year period, we never saw any of our patients reverse diabetes, not one. The patient care plan was diabetic management through pharmaceuticals. And in 2000, I left regular health care and went to a clinic outside of Washington, D.C. that we specialized in reversing diabetes. And we had over a 98% reversal rate. And it was just such a disparity to go from thinking you couldn't reverse diabetes, it was something for the rest of your life, to something that was something that was reversible and people didn't have to deal with it anymore, and that being type 2. So today I'd like to talk about both type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes, which is two totally different diseases. What do we used to call them before? We used to call them juvenile and adult onset. And the problem was we were getting kids that were, 17, 16, 12, but were starting to get diabetes. And it wasn't juvenile, it was adult onset. And so the name had to change to adult onset to type 1, type 2. But now we're told even if what they know today, they wouldn't even call diabetes, have even the word diabetes in both of them because they're so different of a process. But in type 2 diabetes, how is it that we weren't able to reverse it, but now we can reverse it? What happened? We learned about it. Yeah, and the illustration I like using is if I have a piece of sandpaper and I'm rubbing my arm, and I go and someone puts medicine on it, and then I go to rubbing it again, and then someone puts medicine on it, and I go to rubbing it again. Is it going to heal? Not till I quit doing this. Not till I get rid of the cause. And some people say the cure is in the cause. Find out what the cause is and fix the cure. Does anybody ever worked on a farm, lived on a farm? Okay. So I grew up on a dairy farm. They went beef cattle. And if you've got a tractor that your lift isn't working very well, it starts getting less and less, the power to lift, and you notice that there's liquid trailing behind your tractor, you got two choices. You can get a hired hand to pour a 5-gallon bucket of fluid in it all the time, or you can fix the leak. And with health, many times what we do is we address the signs and symptoms, or we mask the signs and symptoms, and we're not getting to root cause. So the first thing we want to do to figure out a problem of a concern is you got to find out, number one, what is the organ or the system that's being affected. So let's say that a person's having a lot of digestive issues. So what system is that? Digestive system, yes. It may be the stomach, it may be the large intestines, it may be the small intestines. And so you identify the organ and the system. Then you've got to identify the organ and systems that affect that organ or system. So let's say it's stomach problems, acid reflux, or some type of digestive issue. What organ can really impact the digestive system other than the digestive system? The brain. We talked about yesterday, stress can affect the digestive system. Also, can the digestive system affect the brain? So you got to identify what organ or system is being affected, where the cause is, and then identify, is there any organ or systems that could also be correlating with that? And then you have to take away anything that could cause harm to those organs and systems. And then you've got to find what those organs and systems need. Does that make sense? That's just like running a tractor. You got to figure out, what's the problem and what could be causing the problem and just fix it. I call it horse sense, common sense. But sometimes we don't use that in healthcare. So going back to diabetes, what is the major causes of type 2 diabetes? Well, how's it supposed to run? So let's look at how it's supposed to run. And then we can then look at what's not running. Well, you've got trillions of cells in the body. And around each cell, you have insulin receptors. And the insulin receptors open up and they allow the glucose to get into the cell. And insulin opens that insulin receptor, allows glucose in, and then everybody's fine. The problem is when the insulin receptor doesn't work. Type 2 diabetes, they talk about something called insulin resistance. You've heard that term, insulin resistance. Well, that's where it's just not doing its job. So there's 3 major things that I found that if I correct, the diabetes goes away. So the first thing is if the cell gets too large. If the cell gets too large, then the door doesn't open right. In the wintertime, have you ever had a door that sticks or a window that sticks because of the weather? It can, or even in the summertime. It's from a lot of change in moisture. It can change that door or window being able to open. So what happens in type 2 diabetes is if the cell gets too large, then the door just doesn't open right. So how do you fix that?
Make it smaller.
Go back to where it's supposed to be. That's exactly right. And that's called ideal body weight. And so as we bring that person back into ideal body weight, the door starts working again. So what happens when the cell's too large, the door doesn't work right, and the brain identifies that there's not enough glucose in the cell, so then the brain tells the door openers, and the door openers are who? The insulin. And who makes the insulin? The pancreas. It tells the pancreas to make more insulin. So now, because the door's not opening right, your glucose isn't getting in, so you have too much glucose in the blood. It should be going into, you're going to have some glucose, but it should be going into the cell, and it's not going into the cell right because the cells are too large and the door's not opening right. So now your blood glucose is high because it can't get from the blood into the cell, and then your insulin now is high because your brain's telling you need more door openers. And so it's not opening the door right, and so now your blood insulin level is high. See how it works? So simple. So all you have to do is shrink the cell back to ideal body weight. Door starts opening right. Insulin opens the door. Glucose goes in. Brain's happy with how much glucose is in the cell. Tells the door openers, door opener machine, the pancreas, to quit making as much door openers. And now your glucose level's down in the blood because now it's in through the cells. And now your insulin level's down because you're not producing as much insulin because you didn't need more door openers. So that's the main way that we find that we have problems with diabetes. It's just outside ideal body weight, but it's not the only. You can have a person that is ideal body weight and still has type 2 diabetes. So there's something else going on. So what do you do? So for that person, the next problem, and one person may have all 3 problems. That, the ideal body weight's too much, and they have the other issue. So the second major cause, so now let's say we're to have ideal body weight or too much, whichever, the door doesn't work because there's too much fat. Now it's not fat on the body, it's too much fat in the system. And now I don't know what y'all like here, but where I'm from, we fry everything. Maters, taters, ice cream, pickles, chickens, pigs, okra, poke, Oreos, Twinkies. You just fry everything because it tastes so good, right? And then if you don't fry it, you pour oil in it, or you put bacon grease in it, or has anybody ever heard of kilt lettuce? Well, kilt lettuce is where kilt we say. And so you take a bunch of lettuce, put it in an iron skillet, and you pour in a bunch of bacon grease. And you heat it up real good, and you fry that lettuce in there. It's called killed lettuce. And folks love it. Is it good for you? It's a lot of fat. My grandmother made green beans, and she'd make a pot of string beans. Well, most people put hog jowl. Y'all know what hog jowl is? The jaw of the hog. They'll put in bacon or whatever. But grandmother didn't use that. She just poured in a cup of at least. My aunt tells me she used more than a cup of vegetable oil in that nice little pot. Wasn't a huge pot, just normal, usual regular cooking pot of green beans. She poured in cooking oil. Vegetable. She used vegetable oil even. But it was oil. It was fat. And so when we eat diets that are high in fat, whether we're frying stuff, whether we're using a lot of oil, whether we're using dairy. Does dairy have fat in it? Yeah. Does meat have fat in it? Yeah. Just look at the fat content on the label, and a lot of our food we eat today has a lot of fat. Well, that fat clogs it. So let's go back to the farm. Y'all seem like a farming community. As I drove in, I enjoyed looking at your tractors. There must be a good international dealership around here. Is it true? We always chose our tractors based on who had the best dealership, because if your tractor broke down, someone needed to fix it. And so I see quite a few internationals. And so we had internationals. So we had farm oils. Did y'all use farm oils in this area? Mm-hmm. Okay. We had Super M, 2 M's, a C, an A. We just like farm oils. But why? Because that's who fixed tractors in our area. And so you wanted to be able to work. So let's go back to the tractor. Let's go back to the 3-point hitch. You got your 3-point hitch, and then you've got your top bar on the 3-point hitch that you can crank it in and out, to adjust your implement either way. Now, I was on my tractor the other day, and remember how we could reach over to our right and crank it, and you could turn that right, the right part arm on the 3-point hitch up and down. Well, they don't have cranks on them no more. And you got to get off that thing to get over there and turn it. I don't like them turn things. I want to just crank it. It works a lot better. But anyway, you've got your 3-point hitch, and you've got that top bar, and you know how sometimes it gets kind of hard to turn? You might have been out bush hogging or doing something, and it's clogged up with a bunch of gum. So you take that piece off, wash it real good, whether you're using gasoline or kerosene or something, clean that off real good, put it back on there, and fill it full of grease, and it worked good. Well, that's what happens with this little door when it's full of grease, or not grease, fat, oil, whatever, that's in there, and it doesn't work well. So what do? You've got to get rid of the fat. And I'll share with you how to get rid of the fat. A German doctor down at Duke University, y'all heard of Duke? Duke University in North Carolina, he figured out how to get rid of it back in the 1930s. So you get rid of the grease, you get rid of the, it is grease in the food, I guess, the fat, and the door starts opening again. And it allows it to open, allowing the glucose in. The third way that I found that this door doesn't open well is inflammation. What causes inflammation? We talked a little yesterday about inflammation. Harvard University says the #1 cause of inflammation is processed foods. Do we eat processed foods? What's the difference? You've got whole food. There's a term called whole food. There's a term called refined foods. There's a term called processed foods. What's examples of processed foods?
Chicken nuggets.
What?
Chicken nuggets.
Chicken nuggets, okay.
Pasta.
Pasta's processed, it sure is. Yeah, what else? Donuts? Twinkies? And here's how you know if it's processed foods. When you go into the grocery store and you go in the middle aisles of the grocery store, that stuff's pretty well processed. If you go over to the outside aisle where the produce section is that processed? No, you've got carrots and kale and oranges and kiwi and mangoes. That's not processed. But if you're on the inside, marshmallows, candy bars, even sugar, all that stuff is processed. According to Harvard University, and everybody knows about Harvard, Harvard University says that's the #1 cause of inflammation. And so we've got to get that inflammation down. Now, it is true that the body needs inflammation. It takes inflammation for the body to run. But it's just like cholesterol. You need X amount of cholesterol to run, but if you have too much cholesterol, it's bad for you. Well, you need so much inflammation, but too much inflammation causes all kinds of health problems. And you want to reduce that inflammation. What's another good cause of inflammation? Stress. Yes, the #1 diagnosis in America today is stress. Stress causes inflammation. What else? Dehydration. Anybody dehydrated? How much water do we need? We're now told we need, University of California at Davis, they have a huge pediatric program there at Davis. And University of California at Davis has found that for a 5-year-old, it takes a half a gallon of water. Or, well, this is a little bigger, but on this one, it takes 4 of these to run a 5-year-old, up to 128 pounds. Thank you, man. So, a half gallon of water. But do we have to tell farm folks you got to drink water? No. I mean, yeah, okay. My granddaddy and daddy made sure that I had plenty of water when I was out working. But they only let me drink it so fast. I was raised up in the South where it's real hot down there, and you just don't take a mason jar of ice water and drink it all at once. You might fall off the tractor, you know, you just get bush hogged up or disked up. So you want to drink on the water slow. So from a 5-year-old up to 128 pounds is a half a gallon of water. Now that's sit on the couch. If you're out active, working in the garden, sports, whatever, you need more water than that. If you're over 128 pounds is body weight divided by 2, that many ounces of water a day. And that's pretty standard out there in healthcare today, is body weight divided by 2. I used to say 8 glasses a day. Well, that's just the half a gallon. That's the 5-year-old stuff. And it's pretty common today that the medical community is agreeing that we need body weight divided by 2. Now, if a person's super, super large, like I had a patient one time that was 572 pounds, there's a special formula for those folks because that's a whole lot of water, 572 divided by 2. But for most folks out there, body weight divided by 2. But then it's not just body weight divided by 2. You want, because if you drink more than 3 to 4 ounces at a time, you have free flow. And the illustration I used yesterday was the sponge. If you had a sponge and you poured this whole water bottle on it, it's going to absorb whatever that sponge can hold, and then it's going to run all over the table. But if you go and every once in a while do this right here, then it's going to have evaporation and you're not going to overflow. Well, the human body can hold, when we drink water, we can hold about 3 to 4 ounces. Over 3 to 4 ounces, it goes into free flow. And we learned that years ago in physiology. And what happens is that just goes straight to the kidneys and you urinate it out. So let's say you're real thirsty, you hadn't drank anything, so, well, you're losing most of that water. And it's not going to the body for hydration, thus you have dehydration, thus you have inflammation, thus the door doesn't work well. And so dehydration can be an issue. Sleep deprivation is huge. Sleep deprivation is a major cause of inflammation. And I learned that from Harvard. Harvard, you can get a lot of good research from. Sleep deprivation used to be figured at 6 hours. And then there was a study in California. It was called the Breslow-Belloc study in Alameda County, California. And they took 6,900 people, 9 years, then they extended it to 15 years. And at first they found that 7 years was harmful, less than 7 hours was harmful. But then when they finished the 15-year study, they found that it's better 8 hours of sleep, 9 hours of sleep. Now, is sleep deprivation, but they're really flirting with. As you're reading Harvard today, there's more and more research. They're saying it's better to have at least 8 hours sleep, exactly what the Breslow-Belloc study found years ago in Alameda County in California. And so I do expect to see Harvard changing their number from 7.5 to 8 hours. But yet, we've learned that more than 9 hours sleep causes you to die quicker. So it appears that the best for the human body to run, adult body, we know that children need more, and as we get into our geriatric years, we need more. But in the normal adult, in the regular, not normal, but the regular adult life, less than 8 hours, you die quicker. More than 9 hours, you die quicker. Now, what's the problem with more than 9 hours? Soon to be the #1 diagnosis in America. It's not there yet, but soon. Depression. Do people who are depressed, do they sleep a lot of times more than 9 hours? They do. And so that's not healthy for them. Yes, they have depression, that's not healthy, but the act of sleeping more than 9 hours causes a person to die quicker, according to research. And so we want to keep that time frame in with 1 hour. As we look at the human body, we're finding that there's laws of health. And we find that if you do this, the body just runs better. Is that true with vehicles? Is that true is there laws in computers and what makes it run better? Okay. I went to get my car worked on the other day. It was getting a little wobbly on me. And so I went in, had a new set of shocks put on. It was worse. So I took it back to him. I said, it's not even safe. I responded to a fire the other day, and I couldn't drive over 80 miles an hour. I got the interstate I respond on. And I said, I couldn't do over 80 miles an hour. Literally, the back end was, I was afraid I was going to lose it. And I said, I got to drive faster than 80 miles an hour to a fire. And he said, am I out of your view? And so I said, you got to fix my, especially it's in the rear end. It's really going bad in the rear end. And he said, okay, when you get back from New York, bring it back in and I'll look at it. Well, there was a van that was there. And he had the engine running. He says, yeah, I just changed the oil in this one. He said he hadn't changed his oil in 35,000 miles. 35,000 miles he hadn't changed his oil. Is that a problem? Yeah. You know, the newer oil, they say we can go longer. The synthetic oil, usually when I grew up, is every 3,000 miles. But there's laws on taking care of a car. The quickest way for me to get a whooping when I was a kid by my daddy or my granddaddy was not to check the oil on the tractor before I took it out and to not grease the tractor and the implements before I took them out. Y'all understand that as farmers. And that tractor is what brings the bread and butter into the family. And you got to take care of that tractor. They're expensive. They're more expensive today than they were when I was a kid. But there's just laws of how you take care of a tractor, and it's going to last longer. You don't drive it crazy across the field. You got to take care of that tractor. Like people used to have to take care of the horse. Well, we got to take care of our tractors. Our bodies are similar. There's laws of health that we're finding that if you take care of the body a certain way, the body just lives longer. And so some of the things we found is if you drink X amount of water, the body runs better. If you get X amount of sleep, the body runs better. If you get X amount of sun exposure, the body runs better. If you breathe fresh air, does the body live better? We actually find that even the way we breathe, we call it diaphragmatic breathing. Who's had children? Remember the little kids when they breathe, the stomach goes up and down? Well, that's how we should breathe. If you've taken voice lessons or if you've taken wind instrument lessons, the teacher told you to have diaphragmatic breathing. You can hold that high C on a trumpet a whole lot better if you're using diaphragmatic breathing. Well, there's laws of health. Well, we found that these laws of health affect how the insulin receptor works, and how, if the cell's getting too large, or how well that door opens. So again, as we look at diabetes type 2, we've got trillions of cells. We've got an insulin receptor. What are the three things that causes this door not to open well?
Cell being too big.
Cell being too large. What's the second one?
Too small.
Too much fat. Too much fat. And inflammation. Those are three major things. So what do we do to fix it? When people come to me and they say they have type 2 diabetes, can you help me? Yes. And they say, well, how are you so sure that you can help me? Because it's simple. It's really simple. And as I tell people, it's easier to fix type 2 diabetes than it is nail fungus on your toenail. Toenail's a whole lot easier, a whole lot harder, though we're learning more about what's going on in the colon, that can affect nail fungus. And so we're trying to fix that problem in the colon, and we're seeing some improvement in nail fungus. But if we will get to that root issue, diabetes is going away. It's just like, stop using the sandpaper, and then put something on there, some salve, and the skin will grow back. But there's another critical part of it that I've learned, and that's trusting God. God's the one that does the healing. And if y'all are farmers, then you understand that. I haven't found too many farmers that don't believe in God. We trust in God that we'll have a good harvest. We pray that God will bring rain when rain's needed. We'll pray that it quits raining when we need to harvest. That can be a problem, too much rain when it's time to harvest. When it's time to put in hay, you don't want rain. When it's time to put in the corn or the soybean or whatever, the potato, it needs to stop raining. So there was a doctor in Germany, and he was in Germany. Howdy, y'all. Come on in. And so in 1933, he came to the United States. His name was Walter Kempner. He was a medical doctor, and he was also a scientist in biochemistry. And Kempner in 1934 started doing some research on this new protocol, and it was actually for something else. It wasn't even for diabetes. Y'all know how that works? You work on something else and you find out something else works. But he was working on it for hypertension. It was called malignant hypertension. And he came up with this protocol that was reversing malignant hypertension. Now you think malignant, that's it, done. Well, in 1934, he started working on it, and within a year, he had a protocol that was actually reversing malignant hypertension. Well, guess what? People with malignant hypertension who also had diabetes, the diabetes went away. And so that's a good thing. So he started experimenting with this protocol on reversing diabetes, just with people who have diabetes, didn't even have the malignant hypertension. And it was reversing the diabetes. And it works very well. If you went to Duke University today, they'd charge you $13,000 to eat the diet, eat the food. You'd have to stay in a motel in Durham, which is a big city, and that would be quite expensive. And so they used it for years. What bothers me is Duke had it for years, and we didn't know it out in the regular medical community. Why? Why was not the regular healthcare system jumping on this process?
$13,000?
So often in healthcare, We're interested in the money. And so, anyway, let me share with you the program. When you go to Duke, they will, you'll go in the morning, and they get your weight, they take your blood pressure, they take your glucose, the nurse documents everything in the computer, and then you stand in line to see the doctor. And the doctor says, every morning while you're there, and he looks at your numbers and whatever, and you're talking to the doctor about somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds. That's it. That quick. Boom. Next. Because they have over 100 people going through this program. Then everybody goes to the dining hall. And in the dining hall, there's this, it's pretty good size, and you come in this door here, and there's this big old display of fruit. A huge display of fruit. Now wait a minute. They're diabetics, and they're feeding them fruit. We didn't do that in regular health care. Stay away from the fruit. Be careful on the fruit. Don't eat bananas. Don't eat grapes, whatever. And it's true, if bananas really sore you up, well, take half a banana, or don't just eat as much grapes. But here's what you do. You walk into Duke, into the dining hall. You go over there, and you choose 3 servings of fruit. Now, a serving is each: orange, grapefruit, apple, mango, if it's regular size stuff. But if it's little stuff like strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, grapes, a half a cup is a serving. And so what you're doing is, for breakfast, you're getting 3 servings of fruit. Again, a serving is either each of a regular size item, or a half a cup of little stuff, or big stuff, like you don't eat a whole pineapple, a half a cup of pineapple. Then you come and they give you a bowl of brown rice. Brown rice. Y'all like brown rice? And you go, and that's your breakfast. 1 cup of brown rice and 3 servings of fruit. Again, if a specific fruit runs your blood sugar up high, either don't eat it or eat less of. And then you leave there, and you'll go to the gym 4 times that day. They want you exercising 4 times. And then they'll have a lecture in the morning that might be on nutrition or might be on whatever. And so you're going to exercise twice in the morning, you're having 1 lecture in the morning, and then you come for dinner. Now, dinner for me is the noon meal. That's the way we were taught on the farm, the noon meal. So you come in for dinner, and now instead of all the fruit there, they have this huge salad bar. Y'all like salad? A huge salad bar. It's like going to a Ryan's restaurant with all this vegetables, fresh vegetables. You got lettuce and kale and spinach and raw broccoli and raw cauliflower and raw carrots and just all kinds of raw vegetables. Fill your plate plumb full of salad. Then they won't let you have dressing on it or oil on it, or they won't let you have cheese on it, and they won't let you have meat on it. Why? It's fat, exactly. And so Kempner learned, okay, we got to shrink the cell so we don't have a lot of food we need them to lose weight. But then I've got to clean this insulin receptor out that's clogged with fat. Who's ever used a concrete mixer? Anybody used a concrete mixer? Okay. So what if you clean that concrete, at the end of the day, you clean that concrete mixer out with concrete? Is that going to work? No. What do you clean it out with? Water. You got to get all that concrete out. Well, Kempner found you've got to clean this insulin receptor out, not with fat. You just don't use fat. And so there's no oil, there's no dressing, there's no dairy, cheese, and there's no meat, because we gotta clean the fat off of this receptor. And so by not having fat, it's gonna wear away. And it's gonna, after a while, the fat will leave, and it's gonna clean it up. So you've got this huge salad bar over there against that wall, and then he lets you use lemon juice on there. But you could use some lemon juice, use some lime juice, and that's it. Now I negotiate with people. There's some people say, well, I can't just do that. Okay, let's look at plan B. Plan B, I'll say, okay, let's use salsa. Y'all like salsa? Put you some salsa on there. Now what's in salsa? Tomatoes, some lemon, onion, maybe some pepper. So it's pretty simple, low sodium salsa. If you make it yourself, don't put any salt on there. He didn't want to use salt. And so you can put some salsa on top of that salad. Is that reasonable? Is that something that tastes good? Yeah, it will taste good. And then they give you a bowl of 1 cup of brown rice. The brown rice is the protein. The brown rice is the protein. Adequate protein. Research has found that eating that brown rice is well adequate for getting your daily protein amount. Now, when I went to this clinic that I went to, I got there, and it's before I learned the Duke program. So they were using a different food, similar food, but a little different. But when I got there, I noticed they were not serving supper to the diabetics. Well, they didn't serve supper to anybody, actually. But especially, they did it for the diabetics. They did serve it for some people that were low in weight and needed to come up, but most people, they didn't serve them supper. Well, but it was mostly for the benefit of those diabetic folks and folks that needed to lose weight. And here for 2 reasons I'll share. For losing weight, when you eat breakfast, it increases the metabolism and you burn calories. When you eat dinner, the noon meal, it increases metabolism, you burn calories. But around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and Dr. Koop is the doctor who figured this out. He was world renowned as the best guy out there in knowing the metabolism. Well, Koop found around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 minutes from now, he found that when we eat after 2 o'clock, that our metabolism starts shutting down. And we don't burn off calories. Growing up on a farm, we ate a big breakfast, we ate a big dinner, but for supper, in the summertime, it might be watermelon, it might be cantaloupe, something similar like that. In the wintertime, it would be maybe a bowl of tomato soup, but a lot of times, summer or wintertime, it was just popcorn. That's all we ate. Why? Farming people are smart people. If they ain't smart, they're not going to figure out how to farm. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, they told me that you just don't feel as good when you eat a big old supper. My dad, my grandparents, great-grandparents, they went through the Depression. Those were hard times. And even on farming, on dairy farm, I mean, you don't tell Bossy, we're taking the day off. You got to go milk Bossy at this time. You got to milk Bossy at this time. And some people do 3 milkings a day, but we just did 2 milkings a day. And so that takes time. Then you got all your other chores you got to do for, if it's in harvest season or in growing season, you got to make sure, you've got your hay, you've got your corn, silage, you got all this stuff that you're growing. There's a lot of work to do. Plus you grow your garden. Well, why are you going to spend all this time growing a garden and then you eat it and it make you feel bad? That's not good common sense. So my grandparents, they figured out that if you eat real light at supper, you didn't feel as bad. And why waste all that food? It's hard, it takes time and hard to put up food, canned food. We canned our food. We put our food up. And so that just made common sense. So that's why we ate a real big breakfast, a real big dinner where we got our calories, and then in the evening we ate light. Well, there's a reason for that. At 3 o'clock, around that time, metabolism starts shutting off. At 2:30, actually, our oh boy, it's in the blood. It looks like a piece of rice. It's got hash marks on it. I'll think of it in a minute.
Platelets?
No, it's another item. It changes, actually even changes the way it looks, and it makes you more prone to cancer or the spreading of cancer if you eat after 2:30 in the afternoon. And that was just found out within the last 2 years. A buddy of mine, he's internal medicine, called me. He says, "Walt, I just went to this clinic. This is really cool research that we're now finding. And the cancer is not really going through the DNA as we thought it was. It's going through the mitochondria."
Mitochondria.
There we go, mitochondria. So the mitochondria changes when we eat after 2:30 in the afternoon. Makes you more prone to get the spread of cancer, or if you have cancer, to spread the cancer. So if a person has cancer, to slow down the spread, they found it's best to stop eating at 2:30. So one thing, your metabolism shuts down and you're more prone to gain weight. The other problem is when you eat before going to bed, that food has a propensity to putrefy and ferment. And that's why you don't feel as good at night, because of the putrefaction, fermentation, and that's what my grandparents were feeling. They didn't like that feel. So I got to this clinic and I noticed they were feeding the patients breakfast and dinner, but they weren't feeding them supper. So I went in and I was the director. I went into the medical folks, to the doctors, and I said, "Listen, we got to have here a breakfast, a mid-morning snack, dinner, afternoon snack, supper, and an HS snack, our sleep snack." And they decided to play with me. And they said, "Why?" And I said, "Because it's a standard of practice. It's what the American Dietetic Association tells us we're supposed to do. It's not safe not to do this." And then they asked me one more question, and I walked out of the room. They said, "How many diabetics did you reverse where you come from?" 0. In 20 years, not one patient did we reverse their diabetes. And I knew how much they were reversing, and nobody was falling over dead. They weren't having any crazy diabetic problems by not eating supper. So I walked out of the room. And I later found that if you want, you can feed a person supper and reverse the diabetes, but it reverses significantly faster if they don't eat supper. Significantly faster. And I wanted to reverse the diabetes for that person as quick as I can. So, eating a good breakfast, a good dinner, and not eating supper. Now, I do have people that come in and say, "There's no way. I have to have supper." Okay, let's negotiate. Because I want to help them. I want to help them reverse the diabetes. I said, "Okay, if you want to reverse it the fastest, don't eat supper. But, you like V8 juice?" Most people do. Then go get you some V8 juice and drink that V8 juice for supper. Will that work? And most people tell me, "Yeah, that'll kind of fill me up. I can do that." And so it's when you eat a meal, it takes about 2.5 hours on average to digest that meal. When you drink juice, when you take the fiber out, it's in the blood within 15 to 20 minutes. And so it works pretty good. It doesn't work as well, but it'll work. So what they did it do to reverse the diabetes is they gave them just a basic diet of the cup of brown rice for the protein. Now the brown rice, let's see if I can find it here real quick. At Duke, it's brown rice. They even wash it several times to make sure there's But let me show you. My wife, she makes a really good brown rice. See if I can find it here real quick. And this is what we feed folks when we do programs to reverse diabetes.
How early do you get to eat breakfast?
That's a very good question. A very good question. A component to that law of health, that's how the body runs. Research shows that if you don't eat breakfast within 2 hours of awaking, you increase your risk of a heart attack and a stroke by 150%. So whatever that time you awake, you want to eat breakfast within 2 hours of that time because it affects the platelets. It actually thins the platelets out when you eat the breakfast in that time frame. And if you don't eat breakfast within, they see it increases the risk of a heart attack and a stroke. So usually our patients got up at 6 and we had breakfast at 7. And then say if you have the noon meal at 1, then that works pretty good. Yeah. Let me give you Mary Lou's recipe.
So would you exercise before breakfast? Or?
Good question. Part of, again, physiology. It is always best to stroll after a meal. Gastroenterologists will tell you that. Also, we find that the insulin works better when you stroll after a meal. So a person could exercise before breakfast. They could exercise later. You don't want to do aggressive exercise after you eat. I noticed when I would sit down with my patients at 6 o'clock, they'd come in at 6 o'clock, get up, come down. They'd get up earlier, but at 6 o'clock I was there for them to come in and for me to check their blood glucose. And I'd check their glucose, and let's say it's 180, 190. I'd send them at that time before breakfast for a 30-minute power walk. They'd come back and their glucose would be 120, 130. So I told a friend of mine who is a professor at Loma Linda Medical School, and he taught medical school there, of that, and he said, that's interesting. 2 years later, I saw him at another convention, and he says, Walt, you know what you told me 2 years ago? He said, we did some research on it. And he said just a 20-minute power walk lowers the blood sugar more than 1 shot of insulin. Isn't that cool? Kempner was a genius. This is back in the 1930s. And he found that he could stabilize blood sugar by having his patients walk 4 times a day. So you can do it before breakfast if you want to. Not a problem. So let's look at Mary Lou's brown rice recipe, and I'll share it with you here. You take the rice and you soak it the night before. And if you soak it the night before, you produce more GABA, which GABA is important for your brain. So what she does is she takes a cup of brown rice, 1 cup of brown rice, she soaks it overnight. The next morning she washes it really good. And then she adds 2.5 cups of water, a 1/4 of a teaspoon of turmeric. Now what's turmeric good for?
Inflammation.
And what's one of the causes of diabetes? Right. And it tastes good too. And then she puts a 1/4 of a cup of sliced green onions, scallions. And then she puts a 1/4 of a cup of chopped cilantro. So that's 1 cup of brown rice soaked overnight. The next morning, strain it, wash it good, and then put it in the pot and put in how much water? 2.5 cups of water. And how much turmeric? 1/4 of a teaspoon. How much cilantro? Did I say cilantro? Yeah. Okay, 1/4 of a cup of cilantro. And how much of the scallions? 1/4 cup. And then she either cooks it on the stove or puts it in a rice cooker. You don't want to use you don't want to use minute rice. You want to cook it. You always want to cook your grains good because grains have a chemical in it called phytic acid. Who's heard of phytic acid? Phytic acid is a thief. Phytic acid will, in your small intestines, when it gets there, it will soak up the nutrients and steal it and takes it on down the feces. And you don't absorb it right. And so you want to get rid of that thief. And so soaking helps, but also cooking your grains, your beans, long helps get rid of phytic acid.
I think sprouting does too.
And sprouting does also. You're exactly right. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Sprouting is super good. Do y'all sprout? Yeah. Beans are 6 times more nutritious sprouted than cooked. Yeah, sprouting's really healthy. And you can do it about anywhere, any time of the year. It's a great way of having, fresh food, green stuff in the wintertime. Who has a rice cooker? Rice cookers are really good. It's a small investment. It's a great Christmas gift. And you can put it in that rice cooker, and Mary Lou, you can leave rice in a rice cooker for a while. And it works great. So what is it for breakfast again?
Brown rice.
How much?
1 cup.
1 cup of brown rice. And then what else is there?
3 servings.
3 servings of fruit. And what's a serving? One piece is a whole, or half a cup of big stuff or little stuff. Yeah. And then, yes, ma'am.
So is it 1 cup of uncooked rice or 1 cup of?
The net, cooked rice. 1 cup of cooked rice. Yes, thank you. And then the exercise, 4 times a day. Exercise is critical in this program. Then the water is also a huge part of reversing the diabetes. It's just part of making the body run right. I mean, can you imagine not giving your dog water? Can you imagine not giving your horse water? Part of having you got to give that horse water. You're going to have problems. So you got to have adequate water. What does an elephant drink? Yesterday morning I was talking to, I was doing a program for Africa, from Kigali. And unfortunately, we're seeing happening in Africa what we saw in Indonesia years ago. As we see people leave, in third world countries, leave from a rural area into a metropolitan area, and they start getting Americanized by our food and our drink. McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Wendy's, fast food, and they start drinking our drinks, our soft drinks. They leave eating healthy food. They leave drinking water. And so as I was talking to this large room of people yesterday, and I told them they need to drink water. Well, the people in Kigali, they're into drinking soft drinks now. And I told them, I said, what animals do they have there? I saw elephants there. I saw zebras there. I saw giraffes there. I didn't see any lions, but what do they drink? I saw crocodiles there. What do they drink? I saw hippopotamuses. I saw rhinoceroses. All those guys drink water. And that's what God made for the animal kingdom and for humans. That's what runs our body best. Can you imagine getting in the shower? This morning I got in the shower and I had a real nice shower of water. But what if Dr. Pepper come out? Or Coca-Cola or Mountain Dew. I'd be sticky. I wouldn't be too clean. Well, if you're washing the insides with Dr. Pepper or Mountain Dew, or what do people drink here? What's the soft drink of choice in this area?
Mountain Dew, Pepsi.
Really? Mountain Dew. Can you tell me where Mountain Dew started? Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh, really?
Knoxville, Tennessee. Mountains, the dew. It started in Knoxville, and that is the choice where I live, is Mountain Dew. Pepsi, Coca-Cola. But when we drank that, that's what we're washing our kidneys with. That's where we're, because it's going in our bodies, that sticky stuff. We wouldn't want it on the outside. Why do we want it on the inside? Do you want that in your brain?
What do you feel about carbonated water?
Carbonation still is not good for us. The carbonation part, whether it's carbonated soft drinks or carbonated water, it's still not healthy for us. Yeah, tastes good, but it's not as good for us. And I have people who I ask them to drink water, and they'll just plumb tell you, I don't do water. How do I get them doing it? One of the ways I found is take a glass, not a water bottle, but take a glass or a metal container, water container, and put the water in there and put a couple drops of peppermint essential oil, wild orange essential oil, lemon, lime, grapefruit, and it gives it a little flavor. Or they can make herbal teas. Now be careful with green tea. Green tea has caffeine in it, and so you're going to have that diuretic effect. Y'all don't do sweet tea up here, do you?
Do what?
Sweet tea.
Do y'all do sweet tea? We call it sweet tea. Do y'all do sweet tea? Up here? Oh, y'all do? Okay. That's big down south. Sweet tea's big. One, do you know how much sugar it takes to make 1 gallon of sweet tea? Minimum? Now, I'm not talking real sweet tea. I'm talking just bare sweet tea. It takes a cup of sugar to make a gallon of sweet tea. And people will drink a whole gallon a day of that stuff. So they're getting at least 2 cups of sugar. But also the leaves that they use in sweet tea are diuretic. And so you're already not drinking water. You're now taking in a diuretic, just like your regular soft drink, and that caffeine is a diuretic. And so now you're losing that water, which your body needs to run. So we've got the diet, okay. So for breakfast, we had the brown rice, we had the fruit. What did we have for dinner? We had the,
Brown rice again.
how much? And then the salad. Yeah. Lemon juice, lime juice,
Salsa.
salsa, exactly.
Cider vinegar.
Pardon?
Cider vinegar?
That's a good question. I grew up with vinegar sitting on the table. We put it over our spinach. We put it over a lot of stuff. My daddy drank it, said it helped his stomach. Well, the problem with, again, you want to, is there any, remember, if you got an area, you want to find out, does anything harm it? Does anything harm it? Does vinegar harm anything? What it can do is when vinegar goes into the stomach, it has a propensity to irritate, damage the mucosa in the stomach. And the mucosa is the lining around the stomach. You want to protect the mucosa because you don't want what?
Ulcers.
Ulcers. That's right. The other thing is you have digestive enzymes. You've got digestive enzymes in your saliva. You've got enzymes in your stomach. And they're made when the first part of the digestion in the first part is where the pepsin and the amylase, protease, lipase, those guys do their job. And then as you fill the stomach up, the hydrochloric acid, hydrogen and chlorine starts, and it starts making hydrochloric acid. And then as it starts expanding, the stomach starts making hydrochloric acid. And the mucosa starts making digestive enzymes for that next part of digestion. And then the pancreas makes enzymes too. The liver makes enzymes too. So you don't want to damage that mucosa because it makes digestive enzymes to help break down the food. See, what happens is when we eat food, it's called macronutrients, large. And we've got to break it down to micronutrients because the villi in the small intestines have little screens. And if you don't break it down small enough, it doesn't get absorbed into the blood, it just goes right out the feces. So what happens, vinegar can damage the production of, or it can damage the mucosa, which causes the production of the enzymes, and you don't break it down to the macronutrients like it should. So you want to be careful with using vinegar. So nutrition's a big part of it. Exercise is a big part of it. Drinking water is a big part of it. And there's one more part. And that's going to bed by 9 o'clock at night. Sometimes, many times, that's the hardest thing for me to get a person to do. Because many people I work with, they're up till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And it's just a problem. Y'all know what the lymphatic system is? The lymphatic system is the sewer system in the body. The lymphatic system has twice the amount of vessels than the vascular system has. It's like in your exhaust system on the car. Which is bigger, your fuel line or your exhaust line? Exhaust, yeah. And so your exhaust system, and yes, the cell has a dual exhaust system. There's like a furnace going on in a cell, and part of this waste goes out. Some of it does go back into the blood, and but a lot of it goes into the lymphatic system, the exhaust system, and it goes through these filters called the lymph nodes. We need lymph nodes, y'all. We don't need to be taking lymph nodes out. Lymph nodes are important. When we take lymph nodes out, that part of the body is now, you significantly increase the risk of cancer in that region of the body. Be careful taking lymph nodes out. And so, when I was in school, we learned that we had a lymphatic system, but we did not know there's a lymphatic system in the brain. Well, in 2014, we started learning about something called the glymphatic system, and that's in the brain. And the glymphatic system, according to Harvard, kicks on about 9 o'clock at night, and it goes to about midnight. From 9 to about 10, it does a deep, thorough clean in the brain, cleaning the waste. And from 10 o'clock to midnight, Harvard University says, it does a thorough clean and disposes of that waste. But you need to be asleep for the cleaning of the brain. And so, is the brain important? We found it's the most important organ in the body. And so being asleep by 9 o'clock helps to make the brain work better. Does the brain affect everything else in the body? It does. And so if we want to help reverse that diabetes, we want the whole system running tuned up like it's supposed to. And being asleep by 9 o'clock is important. And that genius back at Duke University in the 1930s figured this out, Dr. Kempner. He was very smart. But like I said, he wasn't just a medical doctor. He was also a PhD in biochemistry. Very smart man. And that's the 4 things. Yes?
Wouldn't the lymphatic system and its drainage and how it gets rid of waste also fully be dependent on one's circadian rhythm?
I can't answer.
Everybody has a different circadian
They do, yes. I haven't seen any research on that. We have, though, found some new information just 2 years ago about the glymphatic system. And what we found was, and here's Harvard, here's what they said, though we thought that the only way that the only way to kick on the glymphatic system was through being asleep those hours before midnight, they have found that there is another way, and that is exercise, just like the regular lymphatic system. That's what kicks on the regular. But, bold letters, red letters, but you need both. Just exercise doesn't make up the difference for being asleep. Being asleep doesn't make up the difference for exercise. You need both to have full working of the glymphatic system. So it very easily could. I just haven't read any research on that, so I don't know. It's a good question. Just don't know. We're learning all the time, y'all. I do a lot of, I listen to something called Reach MD. It's a program that does continuing education for physicians. And Reach MD says that a physician, their knowledge base every 3 years becomes obsolete. And you need continuing education, constant continuing education. And so why? Where do we get? That's new research, as you're saying there on that system.
How does afternoon naps affect that kind of stuff?
Afternoon naps can be very effective. The problem with afternoon naps is if it affects going to sleep by 9 o'clock. You're exactly right. So yes, we've seen really good research on power naps, but if it affects the ability to go to sleep at 9, then you have problems there. That's a good question. They're
So
good.
As far as the time goes, say you ate breakfast at 7 in the morning, then a morning nap, would that work?
We know that going to sleep, laying down going to sleep after a meal,
Oh, right.
Not good.
you'll not good, yeah. We have more problem of digestion, yes. So eating dinner and then going to bed is not good. Do you know how the Japanese make sumo wrestlers? They feed them, put them to bed. Feed them, put them to bed. Feed them, put them to bed. And that makes them gain weight faster. Yeah. I don't want to be a sumo wrestler. What I just shared with you is how we see the majority of folks reverse type 2 diabetes. What about that 1-point-something% that it doesn't work for? What do we do for them? There was a lady by the name of Dr. Agatha Thrash, a good friend of mine. And what she taught me is to fast the patient. Now, yesterday, as I talked with the folks in Africa, they're fasting. They're doing a 3-day fast. And we found that when we fast the person for 3 days, we actually even get more turbo boost on reversing the diabetes. And people say, how can you fast a person? Because their blood sugar's going to what? Yeah. Well, a low blood sugar is not a diabetic problem normally. A low blood sugar is because you've either given more medication than for what they ate, or they didn't eat enough for the amount of medication they took. Basically the same thing. I was teaching down in Alabama. Y'all know where University of Alabama is. Starts with a T. Tuscaloosa. I was teaching down in Tuscaloosa a couple years ago, and I get a phone call. And so y'all noticed yesterday I checked my phone because I'm on the fire department, and I got a phone call, and it was our assistant chief had driven off the side of the mountain. And what happened? Well, what happened was he got up, took his insulin, did whatever through the morning, didn't eat dinner, and it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He was driving his side-by-side and just plumb passed out and drove off the side of the mountain. Fortunately, it didn't kill him. So what happens is, with diabetes, blood sugar go up. So we keep it in the right range with medication. The food is what's causing it to go up. So we have to keep it down here. If you don't eat the food, then it's going to be lower. So do y'all know how to do sliding scale? If you know how to do sliding scale, it's real simple. You just use the amount of insulin that you need for the amount of what your blood sugar is. And people who do sliding scale, that's the easiest way to do the insulin. So if that blood sugar is too low, you just don't take as much insulin, you don't take as much metformin. And it's pretty common that during that first 3 days that we may not even use any insulin. I was sharing with the folks yesterday in Africa, in Kigali, that we had a lady, I gave them two stories, two situations. Both ladies, their blood glucose was 400, well 399. Both of them actually were 399, so right at 400. And both of them were on insulin, both of them were on metformin, both of them had poor ambulation. One was on a walker, one was on a cane. At the end of 14 days, at that time, I'm just looking at 2 periods of time. I'm not saying when we got them off or whatever, but at the end of 14 days, they were off insulin, they're off metformin. One had a blood sugar of 124, 399 to 124. The other one had a blood sugar from 399 to 115. And they were off medication. And they were ambulating better. Now, was the diabetes reversed yet? No. Because we were managing it now through this Duke program, diet. That's not normally what folks are going to want to stay on the rest of their life. 1 cup of brown rice and 3 servings of fruit, and 1 cup of brown rice and a salad. Now, if they'd stayed on that, we could have done real well. But we don't ask that of people. We want to get going and start eating some other food. So how do you know when to quit eating the brown rice diet, Dr. Kempner's diet, and go to there's a little community college in New York called Cornell University. Y'all ever heard of that? Cornell University came up with a program, a diet. Who's heard of T. Colin Campbell? Yes. Y'all heard of T. Colin Campbell? Well, Campbell's the one who came up with this. Actually, T. Colin Campbell is the man who actually coined the name whole food plant-based diet. It was T. Colin Campbell that did that. So what we do is we go from the Duke University program from Dr. Walter Kempner up to the Cornell University program by Dr. T. Colin Campbell. And it's the best diet out there I found. My wife and I have been on that program, that diet now for 20-some years. And we're doing good. And so that's where we then graduate to the Cornell program. That's the PhD program. And how do we know when to graduate from the Duke program to the Cornell program? You do that when you have when they're off their medication, when they have a normal blood sugar, morning fasting, and when they have a normal A1C. So, to have a normal A1C, how long do we need to wait? At least 3 months. Because A1C is you're looking at the red blood cells and what's been going on over the last 3 months. So we usually stay on that for 3 months. And so as I talked to the folks in Kigali yesterday, I said, y'all are going to be on this program for at least 3 months. And then we'll then graduate you to the Cornell program in New York, United States. And we have very good results. This is our 6th program in Kigali, and it's working very, very well. It's the same type of program I ran when I was in Virginia, and that I work with people now when I do in Tennessee. So you stay on the Duke program till 3 things happen. What are they?
Off the medication.
Off the medication. Oh, actually, it's, okay, off the medication. There's actually 4. I forgot one. Off the medication.
Stabilized blood sugar.
Stabilized blood sugar. Normal A1C. And the 4th one is an ideal body weight. You need to be at ideal body weight. So how do you know what ideal body weight is? Well, there's two ways you can look at it. You can look at what the medical community looks at, and that's BMI, body mass index. And BMI is where most of the research is done. And it's real simple. You just look at how tall a person is, and then you look over here to a BMI, and that's how much they need to weigh. The sports industry does not use BMI for the most part. Sports medicine uses, or sports and athletes and that kind of thing, what do they use?
Body fat.
Percent body fat. I think that's more accurate because men and women are different. We're made different. And so the percent body fat plus, I had this guy. He was coming to me. He was I forgot how many degrees black belt he had. Every year he broke at least one Guinness Book World Record, his own from the prior year. And sometimes it was multiple times a year he was breaking his record. He went all over the world, especially to Asia, to demonstrate his art. And this guy was built like a bull, literally like a bull. I mean, he was just strong, muscle like a bull. And when I pulled out the BMI chart, he was way out as obese. But if you had done a what?
Body fat.
Percent body fat, it was way low because it was just sheer muscle. So if you want it to be even more accurate, let's say the person is more athletic, then people say, well, I'm bigger boned, or I have more muscle. Then go to the percent body fat, and it is significantly more accurate. And you can look at what normal, you can look at what area you want to be. If you want athletic or normal or whatever. And men and women have different percent body fat because God made us different, and there's parts of our body there's more fat. So you look at what a male should be, what a female should be. So you stay on the Duke program, Dr. Kempner's diet, until you're at either the ideal body weight, your ideal body weight, whether you're using the BMI or you're using percent body fat, whatever you choose. It's real simple on the BMI. You just look on the chart and oh, there it is right there. That's what I need to weigh. Percent body fat, where can they go around here and get percent body fat? A gym? Y'all have any gyms around? Y'all have any gyms?
Yeah, the YMCA has it.
Okay, the YMCA.
Yeah, they have the machine.
Okay, they got a machine. You can either hang on to a thing, you can step onto something barefooted, and it sends this current up through you, and it will tell you what you are, what percent body fat you are. And I believe that is more accurate than the BMI. For the people in that 1 point something percent that we don't change, get the glucose down. Dr. Thrash taught me to do a 5-day water fast. A 5-day water fast for those folks. And the way she explained it to me, it's like pushing a red reset button on a vacuum cleaner when the power, you ever had a vacuum cleaner, it stops working? And maybe you're vacuuming along, you got a string or something, and it puts too much current on it, and it hits the reset. You have to reset it, and you push that red button, it starts working. Well, that 5-day water fast is like hitting a reset button. And what do you do during that time? Water, and you could drink, say, a herbal tea, but that's it. And still doing the other things, the exercise, the water, going to bed. But that 5-day fast, that seems to do the job for the other folks. Any questions on type 2 diabetes?
How about hereditary? Does heredity have anything to do with
It does. It does. Good question. So I have people who tell me, Walt, I'm just genetically predisposed. Ain't nothing I can do about it. I'll just take my medicine and still eat my donuts and I'm going to be fine. Heredity does have something to do with it. If your granddaddy smokes and he gets cancer, your daddy smokes and he gets cancer, you smoke and you get cancer, is that genetically predisposed? No, it's not. But could heredity do something about it? Yes, because if a parent smokes, and I don't remember, I used to know, it's high, it's over 50%, the probability of that child smoking because their parents smoked. My cholesterol used to be 288. Guys at work told me when I worked in regular health care that I had to go on a statin because I was genetically predisposed. I didn't do that. I did something else. I quit eating cholesterol, and my cholesterol went to 104. Was I genetically predisposed? I was East Tennessee predisposed. You know what I'm saying? Did heredity have something to do with it? Yes, because I ate the same food that my daddy ate, and he ate the same food that his daddy ate. So does heredity affect it? Yes, because as we train our children, do they usually do what we train them? If we don't exercise, if we I've got some folks that come to me. They're large. They're large. Wife's large. Husband's large. One of the boys is large. One of the boys is ideal body weight. They literally look at him and tell him he's the ugly duckling. He is the one that is not healthy. Crazy. And I tell them, leave that boy alone. He's the right ideal body weight. But they're looking at themselves. And there's one guy came in and told me one time what his doctor told him, and it was very smart. The guy went to his doctor and the doctor said, you need to lose weight. And he said, but I'm like everybody else. And the doctor said, maybe you need to start looking at some other people. That was smart. So yes, yes, heredity can make a difference, because if we're eating what our mama fixed and it's not healthy, then there's a good chance we have the same diseases. If we have the same lifestyle overall, if we work on a farm, we're active like daddy and granddaddy and great-granddaddy, then we're probably going to be healthy because we're out there. Now, no, we're not digging post hole ditches like post holes like we used to. When I was a boy, we used post hole diggers, and we used bars. And I lived in the mountains where we had big rocks, and so never would at that time told my daddy, you need to go to a gym, or my granddaddy, or my great-granddaddy. You know what I'm saying, guys? Ladies who grew up on farms, they were strong men. And you never picked a fight with a farm boy. I mean, they were strong. So yes, genetics can, not what they talk about. And it is true that there is some genetics that have a propensity. As one person said, genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. But it's not the issue of what we're told today, where people come in and tell me, I was down in Mississippi, and I was talking to this fella. He was assistant fire chief, and he had diabetes. He had heart disease. He was obese. He just had a bunch of problems. Syndrome X is what we call it. And I said, can I help you with these? Because he was complaining about them. And I said, can I help you with them? Because that's what I do. He goes, nope. My doctor said I had Southern Mississippi syndrome, and as long as I come to him and get his medicine, I was fine and I can eat whatever I want to. So lifestyle has a big part of it. And And yes, we can be more prone too, but lifestyle's the big issue. Another question. There's a question over here on.
Did you share the Cornell diet?
Oh, okay. Let me share Cornell.
Does anybody want to know?
Yeah, good idea. I usually don't talk about it and wait until we get there, but I'm not going to be here when you get there, so I need to tell you
So
about
you're
it.
going to say like
What is it?
1%.
Yeah. It's exactly what this gentleman said right back here. Forks over knives. I encourage you to go and watch the movie Forks Over Knives. Forks Over Knives. Dr. Campbell was one of my professors. Great guy.
We have a cookbook at home.
Excellent. Good. Yeah. What it is, it's a whole food, plant-based diet with variety. So, okay, let's first talk plant-based. What is plant-based? Well, as I mentioned yesterday, Fruit Loops are plant-based. You want me to tell you a story about Fruit Loops? When I got married, we got married on Friday. Mary Lou wanted to get married on Friday because Adam and Eve got married on Friday. So we got married on Friday. Not a good idea because most of your friends are working. So not as many people come to the wedding. It's better to do it on the weekend. But people come. They came. But that evening, she fixed me supper. For supper, for her, she fixed herself a sandwich. It was a piece of bread, mayonnaise, cucumbers, and salt. That was her supper. For me, she fixed me Fruit Loops because I love Fruit Loops. That was our first meal she fixed. We were married. Fruit Loops are plant-based, y'all. They are. So do they not meet the criteria? No. Campbell said it's got to be whole food plant-based. Oreos are plant-based. There's no dairy or meat in Oreos. What is whole food? Whole food is food that hasn't been processed, refined. But yes, we do eat pasta. But really refined stuff, Your best is going to be what you get out of the garden. That's your best food. What you pick off your orchard. What you pick off your vineyard. And so the Cornell diet is whole food, plant-based. So what's plant-based? Vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, grains. What is it eliminating? The type of food, when we just talk plant-based, it's eliminating dairy and meat. When I was 16 years old, I quit eating meat. And I made that decision in the stockyard. We had changed from dairying to beef because Dad had 2 injuries. And we no longer could he get down to milk the cows. We didn't have a herringbone, we had a flat dairy, and Dad couldn't get down and work it as well. Had an accident with hay and had an accident with a tree. And he had to change. So we went with beef cattle. I was in the stockyard. Let me back up. When we had a sick cow and Daddy couldn't fix it, Granddaddy couldn't fix it, great-granddaddy, who was still alive, my great-granddad lived until I was 30-some years old. He was a veterinarian. He worked at Battle Creek, Michigan as a nurse under John Harvey Kellogg. And then he went and he became a veterinarian. And if Granddaddy couldn't fix it, Daddy, Granddad, what do you think we did with that cow when she was dying? No, we found a stockyard. We didn't want her because she was sick. And so we found a stockyard as long as she's on hoof. And you could actually make deals outside off hoof. But we didn't do that. So we found a stockyard that was open, loaded her up, she was gone. Don't let her get down. Don't let her get down. Keep her on hoof. And we sell her for 2 reasons. 1, you don't make money on it. 2, when you live in the mountains where there's a lot of rock, it's hard to dig a hole big enough for a post hole, much less for a cow. And so we found a stockyard to sell that cow for somebody else to eat it. Well, at 16, I was at a stockyard, and this cow come in, and if a cow's sick. Look at her eyes, look at her head, look at her, her gait. You can tell if she's sick, just like you can tell if a person's sick when they walk in. Well, she was a sick cow. She come in, the auctioneer had to do a 360. and she had this huge, huge cancer tumor right behind the front left shoulder. And literally, it was about this big, stuck out like this. And she wasn't going to last much longer, just knowing how she was looking. I was sitting by the guys by the meatpacking house that day. 2 guys from the meatpacking house. They bought her up at a good price. And you just know what's going to, you're there, you know what's supposed to happen. They're supposed to buy her. Nobody else is going to buy her and take her back to the farms. They're supposed to buy her. And we knew they were going to buy her. And bought her for a good price. And I got to thinking, the blood that goes through that, I'd already had anatomy and physiology. The school I went to had good science, and so I'd already had anatomy and physiology by then. And the blood that goes through that juicy steak that I enjoyed, run back up to where that tumor was. Run back up through where that part of her body where you're going to get that steak, run back up through that cancer again. Blood's going to run throughout the whole body, the whole system. So I decided it's time for me to quit eating meat. Then later on, I quit eating dairy. And when I went to Cornell for more knowledge in nutrition, we learned that, now get this y'all, this is amazing, blew me out of the water. If you come off a dairy farm, it's going to blow you out of the water. And I'm quoting from the textbook, Diseases of Affluence, from Cornell University, from Dr. Dairy is the most significant chemical carcinogen ever discovered. Dairy is the most significant chemical carcinogen ever discovered. Now, is that not amazing? Milk, ice cream, milkshake, cheese is the most significant chemical carcinogen, cancer-causing chemical ever discovered. We also learned at Cornell that dairy increases the risk of type 1 diabetes by 1,100%. 1,100%. Why do you want to eat it? I noticed when I was a boy that Dad would never drink milk at the table. Mom gave it to us, but Dad never did. And I'd say, Dad, don't you want some milk? No, I don't care for any, thank you. He knew not to say nothing because Mom would get on to him. What Dad learned later on after Mom died, he wouldn't tell me until after Mom died. What Dad learned at UT when he got his degree in agriculture, he learned in the 50s, in the late 50s, Dad learned at University of Tennessee at Knoxville that dairy milk, cow's milk, is meant for calves, not humans, even though they were teaching animal husbandry. That's exactly what Dr. Campbell taught at Cornell, was dairy milk is meant for calves. Human milk is different. It's a different protein. It's a whole different milk than cow milk. Actually, goat milk is better for us than cow's milk. Rat's milk has the highest protein in it, and I'm not going to be drinking rat's milk. But just because you're a mammal doesn't make any milk. God made different mammals with different milks for that specific structure of that animal. We're not an animal, obviously, and I'm not going to degrade humanity as that. But for that mammal, and we're a mammal. And so the best milk for a human is what? Human milk, yes. But let's go a step further. Now, T. Colin Campbell grew up on a dairy farm. Those of y'all that grew up on a dairy farm, do cows drink milk? Do cows drink milk? No, just the calves. And what happens? Now, if you're on a dairy farm, you're going to take them off. But let's say you're on a beef cattle farm. That beef cow is going to do what? Move away. She's going to wean that calf off of her. So mammals were made to drink milk. What is milk for? I learned at Cornell that milk is meant to put on weight fast. Milk is made, it's a special weight gain formula. Do we want weight gain formula? Especially if we're trying to lose weight? We don't want to be drinking no milk, weight gain formula. The other problem is with dairy is that can there be diseases in dairy? There can. Can there be problems with what they put in? Now, 1900, now I read this in 2000. I read this in the fall of 2000. It came from the Department of Agriculture. In 1900, the average cow, according to the United States Department of Agriculture, produced 1.5 quarts of milk a day. Those of us raised up on a dairy farm, we produced more than that, didn't we? In 1960, the year I was born, the average cow produced 2.25 gallons of milk a day. In 1998, the average cow produced, according to the Department of Agriculture, 15 gallons of milk a day. So in 1900, 1.5 quarts. In 1960, 2.25 gallons. In 1998, 15 gallons of milk a day. So I went to a friend, I was working in Virginia, and I went to a friend of mine who had a 300 head dairy. That's a pretty good sized head dairy. He was my father's age, and he'd been dairying his whole career. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Owens, what were your cows producing? I want to, you read something, remember science, you're always checking science. That's part of science. Science is checking. Not taking it once, check it, check it, check it. And so I asked him, validate. And so I said, Mr. Owens, what were your cows producing in 1960? And he thought, they think in pounds. And okay, he goes, a little over 2 gallons. Okay, right national average. I asked my father, we'd already, obviously, we left dairying, I mentioned. And I said, Dad, what were we doing in 1960? He thought, and he goes, in 1960, we were doing just a little over 2 gallons. So here's a Virginia farmer, a Tennessee farmer, right on national average. Now this is 2000. I asked Mr. Owens, in 1998, 2 years prior, what was your 300 head dairy producing per day? He said, just under 20 gallons. Now an average is an average. Not every cow's producing 15. So some on the bottom side, some on the top side. The average, according to the United States Department of Agriculture, was 15 gallons. Mr. Owens was on the high side, just under 20 gallons a day. I said, Mr. Owens, what's the difference? We're almost a 10-fold increase. What's the difference? He said, well, there's upbreeding. I said, I'll go with upbreeding. We upbred. Mr. Owens, what was it? It's what we're feeding the cows. Also blow you away. Within the past, it's been within this month, a couple come in. And I like knowing what people do for work, and they're dairy farmers. Well, that interests me, obviously. And so I was asking them, tell me about dairying today or whatever. And the man tells me, we don't use bulls no more. AI, artificial insemination. Nope.
How do you get milk?
What do you do? No bull, no AI. He says, don't even have calves. What are you talking about? He said, we take a heifer, we start giving her hormones, we milk her 2 years and beef her out.
Wow.
Yeah, but most milk buyers won't take BST treated milk.
That's good. That's good.
Right.
But that's what some of the dairymen are doing in my area.
Is a known carcinogen too, that,
Or BFT, or whatever.
yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Had you heard of people doing that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, is it possible? Absolutely. We were talking this morning, I talked about how women who come to my wife, who adopt a child, my wife is able to help that lady breastfeed. She gives them herbs. And we do know, back in physiology, I remember my professor telling us just the sucking action, you can stimulate milk. But when my wife gets the lady to start taking fenugreek, alfalfa, interesting, and fennel, and there's a couple herbs she does, that lady who adopts the child is able to start breastfeeding that child. And that's good stuff. That's good. There's not a problem with fenugreek. There's not a problem with alfalfa. There's not a problem with fennel. But there is a problem if that, I don't know who they're selling to, but that if you're getting hormones. What are cows around here producing on average a day, would you say?
Well, it would be in pounds, so it'd be like probably 25,000 pounds a year.
Okay.
We have a dairy, but ours produce between 9 and 10,000 because they're all grass-fed.
It's a big difference.
You know, and we milk once a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Per day, how many per day?
Well, I don't know how many pounds, 9 to 10,000 pounds a year.
Yeah.
So it's
So divide by 365 and then divide that by 8.6 something. What's a pound?
8.6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'd tell you your average. So let's talk type 1 diabetes real quick. Type 1 diabetes, according to Cornell, the number one cause of type 1 diabetes was dairy. Now, I learned it from a professor at Loma Linda Medical School. The number one cause of type 1 diabetes was dairy, Dr. Milton Crane. And Crane found that he could reverse type 1 diabetes in some patients if he caught it within the honeymoon period. The honeymoon period. And how long is the honeymoon period? At that time, when he taught me this, the honeymoon period was 10 to 11 months after onset. The problem today, we're told that the honeymoon period can vary based on patient. It's not a given 10 to 12 months. The problem with that is onset. What is onset? That's when the child has onset of the disease. The problem is that Crane told me is many parents don't observe their children well. Many times the child goes to school, the child goes to, parents come home later than got a babysitter, whatever, and the parents aren't really observing the child. And it may be the school nurse, the teacher, someone starts noticing things. Maybe the parent notices it, but it's well after onset into the honeymoon period. But he found that if he will stop the milk, the cause, and then he did two more things. He used something that was out of New Zealand. It's called niacinamide. It's a type of it's a B3. And it's a type of B3, niacinamide. And if you use the amount of, you just Google niacinamide, New Zealand study, type 1 diabetes, it'll tell you how many milligrams to kilograms of weight that you give the child. And you give them that. Number 3, which is, I've never heard of, this is not normal because you don't normally do this, but right after the child eats, have the child exercise extremely hard. Normally you don't do that, but you have the child exercise extremely hard after every time that they eat. Those 3 things, he was able to reverse type 1 diabetes. Not with everyone, but he was able to see it. There's another doctor out in Arizona, I think it is. I'm pretty sure it's either New Mexico or Arizona. Who's watched the movie, oh boy. I'll think it in just a minute. His name is Dr. Cousins. And he has a clinic out there.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
You saw that, okay. What's the name of the movie? Simply something, I thought, or something like that. Well, what Cousins does is he's treating type 2 diabetics. And what he does is he does similar to Kempner. He does the exercise, he does the water, he does the sleep.
Simply raw.
Simply raw. That's exactly what it is. Simply raw.
I have the video. I have a couple of them if you want to borrow.
Yeah. So he feeds the patients only raw for 30 days. And he found the guy, remember the guy in the program, the young black fella, they thought was type 2. turned out he was type 1. Now he's gone back, he's gone to school, got his doctorate degree, and now he's helping type 1s through that Simply Raw process. So there's another way to help with type 1s, and that's that Simply Raw. Just eat raw. That's it, raw. Now, part of raw, what he allowed in raw was dehydration. You could dehydrate crackers or things, and he counted that as raw. Like a pie, I remember they had the kind of a pie they had, and it had a crust that they dehydrated and made the crust. But it was simply raw. But it's based, so when I have type 1s come, I'm able to help those folks improve. Because I usually get adults. And it's not uncommon to have a person who's 60, 80 units of insulin go down to 5 units, 10 units. Is that reversal? No. Is it better? Absolutely it's better. And how do I do type 1s? The exact way I do type 2s. And it's just bringing that lifestyle into a healthy diet, and to exercise, and to drinking adequate water, getting that sleep at night, and we see that type 1 come right down. The problem with diabetes with so many people I work with, and I don't know if it's that way here or not, but people like to eat. They like to eat. And why give up donuts? If you can just, you're on a pump. Now they got these new, and they're really good machines. It's on their phone, it's sitting here, and just eat a donut and it'll take care of it. But the problem, insulin is not good for you. Metformin is not good for you. Diabetes is not good for you. You can lose your eyesight. You can go on dialysis. Y'all know anybody know someone on dialysis? Yeah. Let's say you've got Wednesday mornings. So you have 3 days a week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday is your day on dialysis that you go. And you want to take vacation. Now, where do people around here go take vacation?
Florida.
Florida. Okay, where? Where do y'all like to go in Florida?
A lot of people like the beach.
Okay, St. Pete Beach. I used to live on St. Pete Beach, just a block off the water. Beautiful, beautiful. So you want to go to St. Pete Beach. So you call up the dialysis unit down in St. Pete and say, I'm going to Florida, first week in February. Have you got a chair available? No. Are you going to St. Pete? No. Well, okay, let's go to Panama City. So you call up Panama City. I'm going to Florida. That's when I have off for work. I want to go to Panama City the first week of February. You've got an empty chair. No. You going to Panama City? Nope. Daytona Beach. Okay, call up Daytona Beach. Y'all got a chair? I got a chair. Okay, we can go to Daytona. Great, excellent. So you fly out on Sunday. Monday, where are you going Monday morning? They got a chair Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the mornings. So where are you going to be Monday morning?
Not on the beach.
In a chair. You're going to be plumb wiped out Monday afternoon, and so you're going to be in the motel. Tuesday, you can go out and enjoy the beach. Where are you going to be Wednesday morning?
Chair.
In the chair. Wednesday afternoon in the motel, just plumb wore out. Where are you going to be Thursday? Out on the beach. Where are you going to be Friday morning? In the chair. Friday, you're going to be afternoon. You're going to be, in the motel room, just plumb wore out. And then you flying home that weekend. You don't want dialysis. That's bad stuff. Yes, there is hemodialysis that you now have portable that you can take with you. Much, much better for hemodialysis. Or you could do, if you're lucky, you could do peritoneal dialysis. And that's a lot easier. You can do that at night and take that with you. But most folks are on hemo where you go to a clinic. Or you might lose your feet. Have you ever seen people lose their feet? Neuropathy, peripheral, diabetic neuropathy, or have people lose their feet because of diabetes? Yeah. And so even just managing your diabetes with your medication is not the answer. It's really not the answer, because I don't want to lose my eyes. I don't want to be him we call hogtied. Y'all use that word up here, hogtied? You ever heard that word, hogtied? That's a farm word. Hogtied to some chair. I don't want to lose my feet. And so reversing diabetes is really a good way to do it. Does it look hard? It's not really hard. I don't encourage people to do it, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Eat healthier then, but let's start January 1st. Everybody's got a New Year's resolution. Do your New Year's resolution of reversing your diabetes. And it's reachable and obtainable. It's reachable and obtainable. Any questions on type 1? Yes?
Even if you're pre-diabetic, it wouldn't hurt to do this either,
Okay, pre-diabetic. That means that your cells starting to get a little bit big. It means it's starting to get clogged up a little bit, and you're starting to get some inflammation.
Yeah.
You do the same thing to bring it back where it belongs. That's right. So take a look at that A1C. Is that A1C starting to climb? You really want an A1C of 5. They say don't have it over 5.5, but if you really look at how A1C is made up, if your blood sugar is supposed to be 70 to 99, a 99 is right around 5. So you really want it 5 or a little less. But they let us fudge to 5.5. And then if you're a diabetic, they say don't let it be below 6.5 or 6. Above 6.5 or 6. But you really want it definitely under 5.5, better at 5. That's where the A1C. You just want a morning glucose. Who works in healthcare? Anybody work in healthcare? Okay. When did you start?
Like 15 years ago.
Okay. When I started working in healthcare, was in the early 80s. They told us that 125 was, as long as it wasn't over 125. Now they don't want it over 99. I'm not really worried about in that just over 100 or whatever, as long as that person's got good exercise and that kind of thing. Any other questions on diabetes? Okay, good. Okay.